My name is Jessica Parker, 32 years old, and I never thought I would stand up to my mother in front of our entire family. But when she called me the most useless child we have at my brother's graduation celebration, something inside me finally snapped. Years of financial support, emotional abuse, and being taken for granted culminated in that moment. As I stood up from my chair, the words flowed naturally. Then stop calling me when you need money. Her face fell. Everyone stopped breathing. I want to know where you're watching from today. Hit that like and subscribe button before we dive into how one moment of courage changed my entire family dynamic forever. My childhood wasn't always difficult. Before my father passed away, our home was filled with laughter and warmth. Dad worked as an architect while Mom stayed home with us three kids. I was the oldest, followed by my sister Amanda, who is 3 years younger, and finally Kyle, the baby of the family, 7 years my junior. We lived in a modest suburban home in Connecticut, comfortable but not extravagant. Everything changed when Dad died unexpectedly of a heart attack when I was 14. I remember that day with painful clarity. I was studying for a biology test when Mom called me downstairs, her face streaked with tears. The news hit our family like a wrecking ball. Not only did we lose our loving father, but we also lost the stability he provided. Mom transformed almost overnight. The woman who once baked cookies and helped with homework became bitter and demanding. The financial strain was immediate and severe. Insurance money only lasted so long, and Mom had to find work with limited job experience. She took a position as a receptionist at a local dental office, but the pay was barely enough to keep us afloat. That's when my childhood effectively ended. At 14, I started babysitting after school and on weekends to help with bills. By 16, I was working 20 hours a week at the local grocery store while maintaining honor roll status. Mom came to expect my paycheck contributions, not as a generous offering, but as my obligation. "Family takes care of family," she would say when I handed over 2/3 of my earnings. I never saw a thank you, just a nod of acknowledgement, as if I was simply doing what was expected. Meanwhile, Amanda and Kyle experienced a different mother than I did. With them, she remained more nurturing, more forgiving. When Amanda wanted dance lessons, Mom found a way. When Kyle needed sports equipment, the money materialized. My requests for SAT prep courses were met with, "You're smart enough already, save the money for something important." Despite the lack of support, I excelled academically. I won a partial scholarship to State University, but still needed to work 30 hours weekly to cover remaining tuition and living expenses. I graduated with a degree in marketing, carrying the burden of student loans, but proud of my accomplishment. Not a single family member attended my graduation ceremony. Mom claimed she couldn't get time off work. Amanda had a dance recital. Kyle was only 11, too young to come alone. My career trajectory was hard-won. Starting as a marketing assistant at a small firm, I put in long hours and took night courses to build my skills. Promotions followed as I proved my worth. By 26, I was a marketing manager at a respected company with a comfortable salary for the first time in my life. That's when the financial requests from home intensified. First, it was help with the mortgage when Mom faced reduced hours. Then Amanda needed assistance with her college tuition. Kyle's high school graduation prompted requests for money to throw him a proper party. I never said no. Despite the emotional distance, they were still my family. What stung most was how these financial contributions were always framed not as generous assistance, but as expected family duty. There was never acknowledgement of the sacrifice involved or how I was putting my own financial future on hold. When I helped Amanda with her college expenses, Mom simply said, "Well, she deserves to focus on her studies without working like you did." The comment stung. Did I not deserve the same opportunity? But I swallowed my hurt, as I had been conditioned to do for years. By 30, I was a marketing executive with a respectable salary, my own condo, and the beginnings of a retirement account. I maintained a careful budget that always included a family support category. This money helped Mom with home repairs, contributed to Kyle's college fund, and occasionally bailed out Amanda from credit card debt. These weren't small amounts. Last year alone, I had given my family over $15,000. The few times I mentioned feeling unappreciated, Mom's response was swift and cutting. "Do you want a medal for helping your family? Is that what this is about? Your father would be ashamed of your selfishness." My father would be ashamed. Those words haunted me. I wondered often what Dad would think of the family dynamic that had evolved after his death. Would he approve of Mom's treatment of me? Would he be proud of how I had stepped up? These questions remained unanswered, but they kept me tethered to a family that took far more than they gave emotionally. I tried therapy briefly at 28, seeking to understand why I continued to support a family that showed me so little affection. My therapist gently suggested that I was trying to buy the love that had been freely given before my father's death. The insight was painful but accurate. Still, knowing the unhealthy pattern didn't make it easier to break. Dating was difficult with such family obligations. My last serious boyfriend, Mark, couldn't understand why I continued to support my family while receiving emotional abuse in return. "They're using you, Jess," he said during our final argument. "And you're letting them." We broke up shortly after. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't ready to hear it. Through all of this, I maintained the appearance of the successful, put-together professional. Few people knew about the dysfunctional family dynamic I was financing. Fewer still understood why I couldn't simply walk away. The emotional hooks were set deep, reinforced by years of conditioning that family obligation trumped personal well-being. My mother had masterfully ensured that any boundary setting on my part was reframed as selfishness and betrayal of family values. So I continued the pattern, writing checks for new tires for Mom's car, helping with Amanda's security deposit on a new apartment, contributing to Kyle's textbook expenses. Each contribution met with expectation rather than gratitude. Each family gathering filled with subtle digs about my personal life, my appearance, my lack of a husband or children. All that career success, but what does it really mean without a family of your own? Mom would ask pointedly over holiday dinners. I weathered it all, telling myself that family was worth the sacrifice, that one day somehow things would change, that perhaps with enough support, enough patience, enough love, my mother would see me. Really see me. Not as a checkbook or a disappointment, but as a daughter who had given everything she could. That hope sustained me through years of emotional drought, until my brother's graduation celebration, when the illusion finally and irrevocably shattered. I spent $300 on catering for Kyle's graduation celebration, another $200 on a custom cake from the upscale bakery across town, and $400 on a laptop as his graduation gift. The event was held at Mom's house, but I arrived early to set up, arranging platters of gourmet sandwiches and pasta salads on the dining room table. "You didn't need to go overboard," Mom said as she watched me work. "It's just family." But I noticed she didn't offer to reimburse me or suggest scaling back the spread. "Kyle deserves to be celebrated," I replied. "Graduating with honors is a big achievement." I was proud of my little brother. Despite the family turbulence, he'd maintained excellent grades and secured a position in a competitive engineering program. Guests began arriving at noon. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few family friends filled the modest ranch-style home with chatter and laughter. I played the gracious co-host, refilling drinks and ensuring everyone had enough to eat, all while fielding the usual questions about my love life and when I planned to settle down. "Still married to your career, Jessica?" Uncle Robert asked with a chuckle that grated on my nerves. "You know you're not getting any younger." I forced a smile. "The company's doing really well. We just landed the Horizon account last month." But he had already turned away, uninterested in my professional achievements. Kyle arrived last, having gone out for breakfast with some friends. He beamed when he saw the spread, giving me a genuine hug of appreciation. "This is awesome, Jess. Thank you." Those 3 words, so simple yet so rare in this household, warmed me from the inside. This was why I did it all, for moments of real connection with my siblings. Amanda arrived with her new boyfriend, a doctoral student named Paul, who seemed overly aware of his academic credentials. She greeted me with the air kiss typical of our adult relationship, close, but never quite connecting. "Nice party," she commented, though I told Mom we should have held it at Riverside Restaurant. Their event space is so much more elegant. She didn't mention that such a venue would have cost at least twice as much money she surely knew would have come from my pocket. The gathering progressed pleasantly enough through the appetizers and into the main meal. I sat between my cousin Sarah and Kyle's best friend Ethan, making polite conversation while keeping an eye on the buffet table to ensure it remained well stocked. Mom sat at the head of the table holding court, as she often did at family functions, sharing anecdotes about Kyle's childhood achievements. "Remember when Kyle won the science fair in 5th grade?" she said proudly. "We always knew he would go into something technical. He has his father's mind." I took a sip of water, pushing down the memory of my own science fair victory that had gone unacknowledged. It wasn't about me today. This was Kyle's celebration. The conversation eventually turned to plans for the future. Various family members shared updates on jobs moves and life changes. Aunt Patricia's retirement, Cousin Michael's new house in Denver, Amanda's application to graduate school, which Mom mentioned with effusive pride. "And what about you, Jessica?" Aunt Linda asked politely. "Any exciting developments?" Before I could answer, Mom interjected. "Jessica's still at the same company, very stable." The word stable sounded like stagnant in her tone. "Actually," I corrected gently, "I received a promotion last month. I'm now the senior marketing director for the Eastern region." There was a moment of impressed murmuring around the table. "That must come with a nice raise," Uncle Robert commented. "It does," I acknowledged, "though most of it will go toward paying down my student loans faster." Student loans I wouldn't have if I'd received the same level of financial support my siblings enjoyed. Mom made a dismissive noise. "Always so focused on money. There's more to life than a big salary, Jessica." The irony of this statement, coming from someone who regularly asked me for financial help, wasn't lost on me. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but maintained my composure. "Speaking of future plans," Mom continued, redirecting attention to Kyle. "Kyle's considering a summer internship with Dalton Engineering. Very prestigious." "That's wonderful, Kyle," I said sincerely. "If you need any help with interview prep or your resume, let me know." "Thanks, Jess," Kyle replied. "Actually, there's a housing issue. The internship is in Boston, and the stipend doesn't really cover living expenses in the city." "I was going to talk to you about possibly—" Mom cut him off. "Family helps family. Jessica can certainly help with an apartment deposit. It's an investment in your future." I felt all eyes turn to me, the expectation palpable. This was how it always happened. Financial requests weren't made privately or with consideration of my own situation. They were announced publicly, making it nearly impossible to decline without appearing selfish. "We can discuss it later," I said, trying to keep my tone light despite the familiar resentment building inside. "What's to discuss?" Mom asked, her voice taking on the edge I knew too well. "Your brother has an opportunity. You have the means to help. Isn't that what family does?" The table grew uncomfortably quiet. I could feel my heart pounding. "Yes, of course, I just meant we could talk about the details later." Mom wasn't satisfied. "You know, sometimes I wonder where your priorities are, Jessica. You never seem enthusiastic about supporting your siblings. When I was raising you kids after your father died, I gave everything I had. I never hesitated." The comparison was unfair and inaccurate. I had been contributing to family expenses since I was a teenager. I had put my own dreams on hold countless times to help my siblings pursue theirs. "I've always supported Kyle and Amanda," I said quietly. "I've never said no when anyone needed help." "But it's always with that attitude," Mom countered. "That martyr complex, like you're making some grand sacrifice." "Isn't it a sacrifice?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "I've put thousands of dollars into this family, money that could have gone toward my own future." Mom's face hardened. "So now we're keeping score? Is that how you see family? As a balance sheet?" I tried to backtrack, aware of the uncomfortable audience to our dispute. "That's not what I meant. You just what?" Mom interrupted. "Want recognition, applause, a trophy for doing what any decent family member would do?" Her voice rose with each question. "No, I just want—" "I'll tell you what you want," she continued, fully launched into the familiar tirade. "You want everyone to acknowledge how much better you are than the rest of us, how successful, how generous. But you know what, Jessica? For all your financial success, you've never understood what really matters." The dining room was dead silent now. Even the clink of silverware had ceased as everyone watched the unfolding drama. "Mom, please," Kyle said softly. "Not today." but she was beyond stopping. Years of unspoken tension were erupting at the most public, inappropriate moment. "It's true, though," she insisted. "Look at Amanda. She might not make as much money, but she calls me every day, helps with errands, actually shows up emotionally. And Kyle, he's always been the thoughtful one, remembering birthdays, helping neighbors, volunteering. But you, Jessica." She shook her head in disappointment. "You think writing checks makes you a good daughter, a good sister. That's why you're the most useless child we have." The words hung in the air like poison. I felt as if I'd been slapped. 20 years of sacrifice, of putting my family's needs before my own, dismissed in a single cruel sentence. The room swam before my eyes as shocked expressions turned toward me, then quickly away in secondhand embarrassment. That's when something inside me broke, or perhaps something finally healed. The silence following my mother's words was deafening. I could hear the wall clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen, someone's uncomfortable throat clearing. My face burned with humiliation as 18 pairs of eyes avoided meeting mine. 20 years of emotional and financial sacrifice had culminated in this public denouncement. "You're the most useless child we have." In that suspended moment, memories flashed through my mind with startling clarity. 16-year-old me handing over my first paycheck from the grocery store. 19-year-old me working night shifts to pay tuition while my roommates went to parties. 24-year-old me sending money for Amanda's study abroad program instead of taking the vacation I'd been saving for. 29-year-old me co-signing for mom's car loan despite my financial advisor's warnings. All those years I had told myself I was being a good daughter, a loving sister. That family obligation trumped personal needs. That one day, somehow my sacrifices would be recognized and appreciated. What a fool I had been. I looked at my mother's face, still contorted with self-righteous anger, and suddenly saw with perfect clarity the manipulation that had controlled my adult life. The constant emotional withholding paired with financial expectations. The way my achievements were minimized while my contributions were maximized. The double standard applied to me versus my siblings. Something shifted inside me, a lifetime of acquiescence, transforming into resolve. I placed my napkin carefully beside my plate and rose from my chair, my movements deliberate and calm, despite the earthquake happening within. "Then stop calling me when you need money," I said, my voice steady and clear in the silent room. Mom's expression froze, then crumbled into shocked disbelief. She hadn't expected me to fight back, not here, not with an audience. I had always swallowed her criticism, apologized for imagined offenses, accepted my designated role as family ATM and emotional punching bag. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "After everything I've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Mom?" The question wasn't angry, but genuinely curious. "Since Dad died, when have you ever put my needs first? When have you supported my dreams the way you support Amanda's and Kyle's?" She started to respond, but I continued addressing the wider table. "Did you all know I've been financially supporting this family since I was 14? I wasn't shouting, which seemed to make the revelation all the more powerful. That I worked through high school and college while sending money home. That I've contributed over $60,000 to this family in the last decade." Aunt Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. My cousin Sarah looked at me with dawning understanding. "Last year alone, I paid for Mom's roof repairs, Amanda's car insurance, and Kyle's laptop." I continued. "I helped with property taxes, medical bills, and holiday gifts. I don't say this to embarrass anyone or to keep score as Mom suggests. I say it because I'm done being called selfish and useless while being treated like a blank check." "Jessica, this isn't the time or place," Mom hissed, glancing nervously at our relatives. "When is the time, Mom? When we're alone, and you can guilt me into silence again, when there's no one to witness how you twist everything to make me the villain." Kyle pushed his chair back. "Is this true? Mom, has Jess been paying for all that stuff?" "Your sister likes to exaggerate," Mom began, but Amanda interrupted. "The roof repairs. You told me that was covered by insurance." "It was," Mom insisted. "Jessica just helped with the deductible." $5,000 isn't just the deductible," I corrected quietly. "And there was no insurance claim. You told me the policy wouldn't cover it because it was wear and tear." The look of confusion on Amanda's face confirmed what I had suspected: different stories told to different children, all designed to maximize financial gain while minimizing acknowledgement. "And my car insurance?" Amanda asked slowly. "You said that was coming from Dad's investment account." "Dad's investment account was depleted before you graduated high school," I told her. "I've been paying your insurance for 3 years." Mom's face had gone from angry to panicked. "You're making me sound like some kind of con artist," she accused. "I'm your mother. Everything I've done has been to hold this family together after your father left us with nothing." "Dad didn't leave us with nothing," I countered. "He left a life insurance policy and retirement savings that should have sustained us for years. What happened to that money, Mom?" Her silence was answer enough. "I don't blame you for needing help." I continued, softening my tone slightly. "What I can't accept anymore is being emotionally abused while providing that help, being called selfish, useless, and materialistic by the very person who benefits most from my financial support." I turned to Kyle, whose graduation celebration had been derailed by this long overdue confrontation. "I'm sorry this is happening today, Kyle. You deserve to be celebrated, and I'm ruining your party." "No, Jess," he said, standing to face me. "I had no idea. All these years I thought—" He trailed off, struggling with this new reality. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're my little brother, and I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to have opportunities I didn't have. I never wanted you to feel burdened." He crossed the room and hugged me fiercely. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. That unexpected gesture of support broke something inside me. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. This wasn't about making a scene or garnering sympathy. This was about finally standing in my truth. "I'm going to leave now," I announced calmly. "I need some space from this family dynamic. I love you all, but I won't be treated this way anymore." As I gathered my purse and car keys, Mom made one last attempt to regain control. "So that's it. You're abandoning your family because of one little comment. How typical Jessica. Always so sensitive, always the victim." I paused at the dining room threshold and turned back to face her. "I'm not abandoning anyone, Mom. I'm simply establishing boundaries that should have existed long ago. When you're ready to treat me with respect and acknowledge my contributions without manipulation, we can talk about rebuilding our relationship." I walked out the front door to my car, hands shaking but spirit strangely calm. For the first time in 20 years, I had spoken my truth. Consequences be damned. Whatever happened next, I would face it as a woman who had finally reclaimed her power. I barely remember the drive home from Mom's house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white, and my mind replayed the confrontation on endless loop. Had I really done that? Had I finally stood up to my mother after decades of emotional subjugation? The faces of my relatives flashed before me, shock, confusion, and in some cases, dawning comprehension. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my apartment. First Amanda, then Kyle, then Aunt Linda. I silenced it and placed it in the center console. Whatever family fallout awaited, it could wait until I had processed what had just happened. The sanctuary of my apartment felt different when I walked in. The space I had worked so hard for, the furniture I had carefully selected, the artwork I had saved, for all of it suddenly represented not just my professional success, but my emotional emancipation. I kicked off my heels, poured myself a glass of wine, and sank onto my sofa, exhaling 20 years of held breath. That's when the tears finally came. Not delicate ladylike tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that bent me double. I cried for the 14-year-old girl who lost both her father and her mother on the same day, though in different ways. I cried for the young woman who worked herself to exhaustion trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I cried for all the milestones celebrated alone, all the achievements dismissed, all the sacrifices unacknowledged. My phone continued to vibrate on the coffee table. 17 missed calls and counting. I ignored it, allowing myself this private moment of grief and strangely relief. An hour later, a knock at my door startled me. I hesitated, then peered through the peephole. Amanda stood in the hallway, her expression uncharacteristically subdued. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but ultimately opened the door. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside to let her enter, noticing how she surveyed my apartment with new eyes. Perhaps realizing for the first time that my lavish lifestyle was actually quite modest given my income and what I had sacrificed. "Kyle wanted to come too, but I told him to give you space," she explained, perching awkwardly on an armchair. "I thought one family member at a time might be less overwhelming." I nodded, waiting. This was her move. "Is it really true?" she finally asked. "About the car insurance and everything else?" "Yes," I answered simply. "Every word." "But why didn't you ever say anything? All these years I thought—" "You thought what? That I was the wealthy, selfish sister who occasionally deigned to help the family. That's the narrative Mom created, Amanda, and you believed it because it was easier than questioning." She flinched at my bluntness but didn't argue. "I didn't know about the roof," she said after a long pause. "Or that you've been helping since high school. Mom always made it seem like your contributions were recent since you got the director position." They weren't. "Why did you do it? Why keep giving when she treated you that way?" The question pierced me. Why indeed? "Because she's my mother," I said finally. "Because you and Kyle are my siblings. Because after Dad died, I thought family was all we had. And I thought if I just gave enough, helped enough, sacrificed enough, eventually she would see me. Really see me." Amanda's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry, Jess. I should have noticed. I should have questioned things more." Her apology was unexpected and disarming. "You were a kid when it started," I acknowledged. "By the time you were old enough to see the pattern, it was firmly established as normal." "What happens now?" she asked. "Mom's furious. She says you humiliated her in front of the whole family." A hollow laugh escaped me. That's rich coming from the woman who called me her most useless child in front of that same family. "I know, that was horrible. I should have said something right then, but I was so shocked." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of dysfunctional family dynamics between us. "I can't go back to how things were," I said finally. "I won't be her emotional punching bag and ATM anymore." "I understand," Amanda said, surprising me again. "Actually, I think it's long overdue." After Amanda left, promising to give me space, but keep in touch, my phone continued its persistent vibration. Texts and calls from extended family rolled in, some supportive, others less so. "Aunt Linda, I always wondered how Sandra afforded that new kitchen last year. Call me when you're ready to talk." Uncle Robert. "Family matters should stay private. Your mother deserves more respect." Cousin Sarah. "I'm so sorry, Jess. I had no idea what you've been going through." My mother's messages were predictably manipulative, cycling through guilt, anger, and victimhood. "I can't believe you would embarrass me like this in front of everyone. After everything I've sacrificed for you kids, this is the thanks I get. Your father would be ashamed of how you've turned on your family. That last one would have crushed me a week ago. Tonight it only reinforced my resolve. Dad would never have allowed one child to be financially exploited and emotionally abused. He would have been ashamed, but not of me." Kyle called late that evening, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea, Jess. All these years I thought Mom was supporting me through college. The laptop, the textbooks, the housing allowance, that was all you." "Most of it," I confirmed. "Mom contributed what she could." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted you to focus on your education, not worry about money." "But at what cost to you?" His voice broke. "I feel terrible." "Don't," I said firmly. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I wanted to help, Kyle. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Still, I'm an adult now. I should be standing on my own feet, not taking my sister's money." We talked for an hour, really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults, rather than as the designated roles we had been assigned in the family narrative. By the end of the call, we had a plan. Kyle would take student loans for his remaining semesters and apply for additional scholarships. The Boston internship would require a budget adjustment, but he was determined to make it work without my financial assistance. "I'm still processing everything," he admitted. "But I want you to know I'm on your side, Jess. What Mom said was unforgivable." His support meant more than I could express. We ended the call with a promise to have dinner the following week, just the two of us. As I prepared for bed, physically and emotionally exhausted, my phone lit up with a final text from my mother. "This family needed you today and you walked out. Think about that while you're enjoying your fancy apartment and selfish freedom." I read it twice, feeling the familiar hook of guilt and obligation. Then, with a deep breath, I did something I had never done before. I blocked her number. The silence that followed felt like the first true peace I had known in 20 years. The days following my confrontation with Mom unfolded in unexpected ways. I had anticipated crushing guilt, frantic damage control, perhaps even crawling back with apologies to preserve family peace. Instead, I experienced a strange, unfamiliar lightness. The constant weight of obligation, the endless mental calculations of what I owed and to whom, lifted gradually like morning fog burning away in sunlight. I took a personal day from work, something I rarely allowed myself. My assistant sounded shocked when I called in, probably because in 7 years I had never taken an unplanned day off. I spent the morning in pajamas with coffee and a novel, luxuriating in the simple pleasure of putting my own needs first. By the afternoon, I felt ready to face my new reality. I called my financial advisor, Jennifer, and scheduled an urgent appointment. She had been gently suggesting for years that my family support budget category was unsustainable advice I had politely but firmly ignored. Now I was ready to listen. "Let me get this straight," Jennifer said after I explained the situation. "You've been contributing an average of $20,000 annually to family support. Give or take," I confirmed. "Some years more, some less." She pulled up my financial records, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Jessica, do you realize what this has cost you long-term? If you had invested even half of these funds over the past decade, you'd have an additional $150,000 in your retirement account, assuming average market returns." The figure stunned me. I knew intellectually that my family support was expensive, but seeing the opportunity cost laid out so starkly was sobering. "That doesn't even account for the compound growth you've lost," she continued. "If this pattern had continued for another decade, you'd be looking at delaying your own retirement by at least 5 years. We spent 2 hours restructuring my finances, creating a budget that prioritized my financial security for the first time. No more family support category. No more emergency fund raids for my siblings' crises. No more retirement contributions on hold to cover my mother's home repairs." "This is your fresh start," Jennifer said as I signed the revised investment plan. "Financial boundaries are just as important as emotional ones." That evening, I joined a virtual support group for adult children of emotionally abusive parents, something my therapist had recommended years ago, but I had always been too ashamed to try. Listening to others share stories so similar to mine demolished the isolation I had felt for years. I wasn't uniquely broken or uniquely responsible. I was one of many adult children struggling to establish healthy boundaries with unhealthy parents. A week passed. My mother tried contacting me through increasingly creative channels after discovering I had blocked her number. Emails with guilt-inducing subject lines, messages through mutual friends, even a handwritten letter delivered to my office that began, "Since you've chosen to cut off communication with your own mother." I maintained my silence not out of spite but self-preservation. Each attempt at contact followed the same pattern: guilt manipulation, selective memory, and ultimately a financial request disguised as reconciliation. "If you really want to prove you care about this family, you would help Kyle with his Boston housing deposit as you promised." Amanda called regularly, our relationship evolving into something more authentic without my mother's interference. She admitted she had always been jealous of my career success and financial independence, never realizing the sacrifices that made it possible or the emotional price I paid at family gatherings. "Mom always made it seem like you had it so easy," she confessed during one call. "Like money just fell into your lap while the rest of us struggled." That narrative served her purpose, I pointed out. If I was the privileged one, it justified asking me for money and treating me poorly when I gave it. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the wider family began choosing sides. Aunt Linda and her husband invited me to dinner where she shared her own history with my mother. Sandra was always like this even as a girl, she revealed. Your grandfather favored her and she learned early how to manipulate people for what she wanted. When your father was alive, he balanced her tendencies. Without him, she trailed off, eyes sad. I should have seen what was happening to you. I'm sorry I didn't. Uncle Robert and his wife, meanwhile, closed ranks around my mother. Family loyalty means something to some of us. He texted after I declined their invitation to a reconciliation dinner that would have included my mother. I didn't respond, recognizing the same manipulation tactics my mother employed. The most surprising development came from Kyle. He called one evening, his voice excited. I figured out a housing solution for Boston, he announced. My friend Tyler is already there for an internship and his roommate is moving out. The rent is reasonable and I can cover it with my stipend if I pick up weekend work at the campus coffee shop. That's great, Kyle, I said, genuinely proud of his problem solving. Are you sure it's manageable with your course load? Positive. And Jess, I didn't ask Mom for help either. I think it's time I started handling my own finances. You know I'm 21. It's overdue. His maturity touched me deeply. Perhaps the family upheaval had accelerated his own journey toward independence. 3 weeks in, my mother changed tactics. If she couldn't reach me directly, she would create a family crisis that required my intervention. She called Amanda in tears, claiming she might lose the house because of overdue property taxes she couldn't afford to pay. Amanda called me immediately. I don't know what to do, Jess. She's hysterical. Says they'll auction the house next month if she doesn't come up with $4,000. In the past, I would have transferred the money immediately, crisis-averted pattern reinforced. This time, I took a deep breath. Did she show you the tax notice? Well, no. She just called crying about it. Ask to see it, I suggested. County tax records are also public. You can verify the amount and deadline online. 2 hours later, Amanda called back, her voice tight with anger. There are no overdue property taxes, Jess. The house isn't in any danger. I checked the county records and then confronted her. She admitted she made it up because she needed money for a cruise deposit and knew I would tell you. A cruise deposit? I repeated incredulously. With her church group, Amanda confirmed. When I called her out on the lie, she said you owe her after the way you embarrassed her at the party, that a vacation is the least you could do to make amends. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost comical. What did you tell her? That she needs therapy, not a cruise, and that if she ever lies to me like that again, she'll be dealing with her problems completely alone. I felt a surge of pride in my sister. That took courage, Amanda. I learned from the best, she replied quietly. Watching you walk out that door at Kyle's party was the bravest thing I've ever seen. It made me realize I've been enabling her too in my own way. A month after the confrontation, I ran into my mother unexpectedly at the grocery store. I had been bracing for this inevitable encounter, but it still sent my heart racing. She spotted me in the produce section, her cart blocking my escape route. Jessica, she acknowledged coolly. Finally decided to rejoin the land of the living. I maintained my calm. Hello, Mom. Excuse me, please. I gestured to indicate I wanted to pass. That's it. After a month of ignoring your family, that's all you have to say. Several shoppers glanced our way. I kept my voice low and steady. I'm not doing this here, Mom. If you want to have a real conversation about our relationship, you can call and set up a time to meet. Otherwise, please respect my space. Her expression darkened. Respect? You talk to me about respect after what you did. Your father would be... Dad would be heartbroken to see how you've treated me, I interrupted, surprising both of us. He loved us equally. He would never have allowed one child to be singled out as the family ATM and emotional scapegoat. For a brief moment, something like recognition flickered in her eyes. Then the shutters came down again. Always so dramatic, she muttered, but she moved her cart aside. As I walked away, she called after me. Kyle's birthday is next month. I suppose you'll skip that too. I turned back. I'll celebrate with Kyle privately as we've arranged. Goodbye, Mom. That brief exchange, while uncomfortable, reinforced my resolve. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't written a check to make the conflict disappear. I had maintained my boundary with calm dignity. Later that evening, I called my therapist and scheduled my first appointment in 2 years. The family dynamic was shifting in ways I couldn't navigate alone, and for once, I was prioritizing my mental health without guilt. It was a small step, but a significant one. As that first month of boundaries came to a close, I received an unexpected email from Kyle. The subject line read simply, "Thank you." The message contained a spreadsheet detailing every financial contribution I had made toward his education and living expenses over the past 3 years, totaling just over $27,000. "I don't know when or if I can repay this financially," he wrote, "but I promise to honor your investment in me by living with integrity and eventually paying it forward. You've been more than a sister to me, Jess. You've been a role model even when I didn't fully see or appreciate it. I love you and I'm in your corner, always." I read his message through tears, not of sadness, but of profound relief. Perhaps the family I had sacrificed so much to preserve wasn't irreparably broken after all. Perhaps from the ashes of unhealthy patterns, something new and authentic could emerge. For the first time in my adult life, I dared to hope that standing up for myself hadn't cost me my family, but instead had created the possibility for real connection based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The road ahead would undoubtedly have challenges, but I faced it with newfound strength, clarity, and the unwavering knowledge that I deserved better, and finally had the courage to demand it. 3 months after the confrontation at Kyle's graduation celebration, I sat in my therapist, Dr. Marshall's office for our weekly session. Through the window, autumn leaves swirled in the October breeze, a fitting metaphor for the ongoing transformation in my life. "How did the lunch with your mother go?" Dr. Marshall asked, referencing the carefully planned meeting I had finally agreed to after weeks of consideration. I took a deep breath. "Better than I expected, but still difficult. We met at that neutral cafe I mentioned, the one halfway between our homes. I arrived first, chose a table in the corner for privacy, but still in public view. Good boundaries." She nodded. "And how did she respond to your conditions for rebuilding the relationship?" Initially with resistance as expected. She started with, "I don't see why we need formal rules for a mother-daughter relationship." When I remained firm, she switched to martyrdom. "I suppose this is what it takes to have any relationship with my daughter now." Dr. Marshall smiled slightly. "Predictable defensive patterns. How did you handle that?" I didn't engage with the emotional bait. I just repeated that my boundaries weren't punishment, but protection, and they were non-negotiable if she wanted me in her life. The list of boundaries I had established was straightforward: no unsolicited financial requests, no public criticism, no comparison with siblings, regular one-on-one time without family interference, and most importantly, acknowledgement of past patterns without defensiveness. The hardest part was when she asked why I couldn't just forgive and forget. I continued. She said, "Families fight, Jessica. It's normal. Why are you still punishing everyone over one little comment?" How did that make you feel? Angry at first that she was minimizing 20 years of emotional abuse as one little comment. But then I realized she genuinely doesn't see the pattern, or doesn't want to. So I just said, "This isn't about punishment, Mom. It's about changing a dynamic that has been harmful to me and ultimately to our entire family." Dr. Marshall nodded encouragingly. "That's excellent insight, Jessica. Did you notice any genuine moments of connection during the meeting?" I reflected on the 90-minute lunch. Maybe one. When I explained how it felt to be called useless after everything I had contributed to the family, she seemed genuinely surprised. She said, "I never thought you took my comments so seriously. You always seemed so self-sufficient, so unaffected." It was the first time she's ever acknowledged that her words might have power to hurt me. "That's significant," Dr. Marshall noted. "It suggests at least some capacity for empathy, however limited." "I'm not expecting miracles," I acknowledged, "but it's a starting point. We agreed to weekly phone calls and monthly lunches for now, with family gatherings on hold until our one-on-one relationship stabilizes." The careful reconstruction of my relationship with my mother was just one aspect of the profound changes in my life. Professionally, I had finally accepted a promotion that required occasional travel, something I had previously declined because of family obligations. My increased salary and the elimination of family financial support had allowed me to accelerate my retirement savings and even begin planning a vacation to Italy, a dream I had deferred for years. Amanda and I had developed a more authentic relationship, meeting weekly for coffee without the distorting lens of our mother's interference. She had started therapy herself, recognizing patterns in her own life that stemmed from our dysfunctional family dynamics. Amanda said something interesting yesterday, I told Dr. Marshall. She said, I always thought you had it all together, that you were mom's favorite because you escaped, because you had this glamorous career and independence. I never realized you were carrying the heaviest burden of all. That's a powerful recognition, Dr. Marshall observed. How did it feel to hear that? Validating, I admitted. All those years, I thought they saw me as the selfish one, the one who abandoned the family for career success. Discovering they envied me while I was drowning in family obligation is still hard to process. Kyle had thrived in his Boston internship, managing his finances independently for the first time. He had called me with pride after negotiating a reduced rent in exchange for managing his apartment building's social media presence, a creative solution that allowed him to build his resume while reducing expenses. I never would have thought of that if I could just call you for money, he had admitted during our last phone call. Turns out, I'm pretty resourceful when necessary. The extended family had largely regrouped along predictable lines. Aunt Linda and her children maintained regular contact, supportive of my boundaries. Uncle Robert's family aligned with my mother, viewing me as the villain who had disrupted family harmony. Others maintained careful neutrality, uncomfortable with choosing sides in a conflict they didn't fully understand. What about dating? Dr. Marshall asked, changing the subject. You mentioned considering that dating app last week. I smiled ruefully. I created a profile, but I haven't activated it yet. It feels strange to consider bringing someone new into my life while I'm still figuring out who I am without the weight of family obligation. That's very self-aware, Jessica. There's no rush. The funny thing is, I'm not lonely anymore, I realized aloud. Before even surrounded by family, I felt profoundly isolated. No one really saw me or understood what I was carrying. Now even spending evenings alone feels peaceful rather than empty. As our session wound down, Dr. Marshall asked her usual closing question. What's one thing you're proud of accomplishing since our last session? I thought for a moment. I returned a call from my mother yesterday where she was hinting about needing new winter tires. In the past, I would have immediately offered to pay for them. This time I just listened, expressed sympathy about tight budgets, and suggested she look into the payment plan the tire shop offers. I smiled at the memory. She was quiet for a moment, then changed the subject. No drama, no guilt trip, just acceptance that this is our new reality. That's significant progress, Jessica, for both of you. As I left the therapy session and walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. Just got the official offer for a permanent position at Boston Engineering after graduation. Starting salary is enough to begin repaying you for all you've done. Love you, sis. I smiled at the message, typing back. So proud of you, but save your money for yourself. The best repayment is seeing you thrive independently. Driving home, I reflected on the journey of the past 3 months. The confrontation that I had feared would destroy my family had instead catalyzed a painful but necessary transformation. We were still finding our way toward a healthier dynamic, with inevitable setbacks and old patterns occasionally resurfacing. But the foundation had shifted irrevocably. I would never again be the family ATM, the emotional scapegoat, the one who sacrificed her own well-being to maintain an illusion of family harmony. Instead, I was becoming something far more valuable, a daughter, sister, and woman who understood her worth and required others to recognize it too. The autumn leaves continued their dance in my rearview mirror, releasing their hold on branches that had sustained them, falling freely through open air, making way for new growth to come. I couldn't help but see my own journey reflected in their graceful surrender and transformation. Sometimes the most powerful act of love for oneself and others is simply letting go. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in my apartment. The decision to take on this traditionally maternal role wasn't made lightly. In our family, holiday gatherings had always been my mother's domain. Her chance to reinforce family hierarchies and showcase her martyrdom through elaborate meals she couldn't possibly manage alone. But this year was different. This year, I had invited only those family members who had demonstrated respect for my boundaries: Kyle, Amanda, and her new boyfriend David, Aunt Linda, and her daughter Sarah. Mom was invited too, but with clear parameters: no financial discussions, no criticism of my cooking or apartment, no comparisons between siblings. "Are you sure about this?" Amanda had asked when I first proposed the idea. "Mom might see it as a power play." "It probably is in some ways," I acknowledged. "But it's also about creating new traditions that don't revolve around old dynamics. If she can't accept that, she doesn't have to come." To my surprise, Mom had accepted with minimal resistance. "I'll bring my sweet potato casserole," she offered. "Unless you think you can make it better." The slight barb was progress compared to her previous behavior. "That would be lovely," I responded, choosing to ignore the dig. Kyle's favorite, as I recall. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke early, strangely excited rather than anxious. My apartment had been transformed for the occasion. The dining table, usually doubling as my work desk, was extended with a rented addition and covered with an actual tablecloth, a splurge from that home goods store I had always loved but rarely indulged in. Fresh flowers brightened the center, surrounded by candles and place cards I had carefully calligraphed for each guest. As I prepped the turkey, I reflected on the extraordinary year behind me. The first 3 months after the confrontation had been the hardest. Breaking patterns established over 20 years didn't happen overnight. There had been tearful phone calls, impulsive texts sent, and regretted moments of crippling guilt, followed by righteous anger. But gradually, with consistent boundaries and the support of therapy, a new family dynamic had emerged. My relationship with my mother had been rebuilt on shakier, but more honest ground. We now spoke twice weekly, our conversations limited primarily to neutral topics. She had attended 6 sessions with my therapist, at first reluctantly, then with grudging engagement. While she never fully acknowledged the extent of her emotional manipulation, she had at least recognized certain patterns and made efforts to modify them. The financial exploitation had ended completely. Not once in the past year had she directly asked me for money, though there had been plenty of hints and indirect references to financial struggles, particularly in the early months. Each time I responded with empathy, but no offers of assistance. Eventually, she had found other solutions, including downsizing to a smaller home that better suited her retirement income. Kyle had graduated with honors and started his engineering career in Boston. He had insisted on creating a modest repayment plan for the education expenses I had covered, sending $100 monthly despite my protests. "It's not about the money," he explained. "It's about acknowledging what you did for me and taking responsibility for my part in the family dynamic." I finally accepted, recognizing that this symbolic repayment was important for his self-respect. Amanda had perhaps changed the most dramatically. After years as my mother's emotional ally, often unwittingly reinforcing her manipulation, she had stepped back and reassessed her role in the family system. Through her own therapy, she had recognized how she had been groomed to be the good daughter, in contrast to my designated role as the selfish one. Our relationship, once characterized by competition and distance, had evolved into genuine sisterhood. The doorbell rang at 11:30, interrupting my reflections. Kyle arrived first, bringing his new girlfriend Layla for the first time. She was a software engineer with an easy laugh and genuine warmth that immediately put me at ease. "Your apartment is beautiful," she complimented, handing me a bouquet of fall flowers. "Kyle talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, hugging my brother. "The best," he assured me. I told her, "You're basically my hero." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Well, now you're just trying to make me cry before the turkey's even in the oven." Amanda and David arrived next, bearing wine and homemade cranberry sauce. "Fair warning," Amanda whispered as she hung her coat. Mom's on her way and she's in a mood. Dad's sister called this morning to say she can't make Christmas, and you know how Mom gets about holiday plans changing. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Thanks for the heads up. I'm prepared. Aunt Linda and Sarah arrived shortly after completing our small gathering except for Mom. We were enjoying appetizers in the living room when her distinctive knock sounded at the door. Opening it, I found her standing stiffly in the hallway, sweet potato casserole in hand, dressed in an outfit I recognized as new. She had made an effort which I chose to interpret as respect for the occasion. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." I greeted her, accepting the casserole. "You look lovely." "The traffic was terrible," she responded, her standard opening complaint. Then, visibly catching herself, she added, "But I'm here now. The apartment looks nice." From her, this qualified as effusive praise. "Thank you. Everyone's in the living room. Kyle brought his girlfriend Layla. She's wonderful. I think you'll like her." The gathering progressed with surprising smoothness. Mom maintained her best behavior, limiting herself to only occasional passive-aggressive comments that I let slide in the spirit of the day. When she complimented the turkey, I nearly dropped my fork in shock. "You've always had a knack for cooking," she acknowledged. "I should have let you help more with holiday meals over the years." The table fell momentarily silent at this unprecedented admission. Kyle caught my eye and raised an eyebrow slightly. I merely smiled and said, "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." After dinner, as we transitioned to coffee and dessert in the living room, Kyle stood and cleared his throat nervously. "I have an announcement," he began, reaching for Layla's hand. "We weren't going to say anything until Christmas, but since everyone we care about is here," he smiled down at his girlfriend. "We're engaged." Exclamations and congratulations erupted around the room. I hugged them both, genuinely delighted. Amanda demanded to see the ring. Aunt Linda wiped away happy tears. My mother's reaction was the most surprising. Instead of immediately centering herself with comments about being a mother-in-law or questions about wedding planning, she simply embraced Kyle, then Layla. "Welcome to our family," she said sincerely. "If you make Kyle as happy as his father made me, you'll have a wonderful life together." The simple, heartfelt statement touched everyone. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the mother she might have been without the bitterness and manipulation that had defined our relationship for so long. Later, as guests began preparing to leave, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen, where I was packing leftovers into containers. "I wanted to say something," she began awkwardly, "about last year at Kyle's graduation party." I tensed, involuntarily, defensive systems activating at the mention of that painful day. "What I said was unforgivable," she continued, surprising me. "Calling you useless when you've been the most reliable, supportive member of this family. I can't take it back, but I want you to know I regret it more than anything I've ever said." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation beneath the apology, the hidden agenda I had been conditioned to expect. But for perhaps the first time in my adult memory, her expression held only genuine remorse. "Thank you for saying that," I responded carefully. "It means a lot to hear." "Your therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies," she continued with a grimace. "I hate that word, but I can't argue with the description. After your father died, I was so overwhelmed, so afraid. I told myself everything I did was to protect the family. But the truth is, I put my needs first and called it maternal sacrifice." The self-awareness stunned me into silence. This was more insight than she had demonstrated in all our joint therapy sessions combined. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she clarified. "I'm just acknowledging what happened, what I did, to you specifically." I nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "I appreciate that, Mom, truly." "This is a nice tradition," she added, gesturing to the apartment full of family. "Maybe next year we could do it at my new place. I don't have as much space, but together we could make it work." The simple invitation, with its acknowledgement that we would work together, rather than me carrying the entire burden, represented a seismic shift in our relationship. "I'd like that," I said honestly. After everyone had left, I sat alone in my living room, surveying the evidence of a successful gathering: empty wine glasses, dessert plates with cake crumbs, a forgotten scarf draped over a chair. The apartment held the lingering warmth of conversation and laughter, so different from the tension-filled family gatherings of the past. I thought about the extraordinary journey of the past year, from that moment of public humiliation and raw courage to this peaceful evening of genuine connection. The road had been neither straight nor easy. There had been moments of doubt, days when it seemed easier to slip back into old patterns than forge ahead into uncharted emotional territory. But standing firm in my truth had ultimately created space for authentic relationships to develop. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. "Best Thanksgiving ever. You're amazing, sis. Love you." Amanda had sent a similar message. "Thank you for today, for everything. Not just dinner, but showing me what courage looks like." Even my mother had texted, "Thank you for including me today. Your father would have been so proud of the woman you've become." That last message brought tears to my eyes. For 20 years, she had wielded my father's memory as a weapon, telling me how disappointed he would have been in my choices. This simple reversal represented perhaps the most profound change in our relationship. I thought about that fateful day a year ago, when I had finally stood up at the dinner table and said, "Then stop calling me when you need money." In that moment of raw courage, I could never have imagined the healing that would eventually follow. I had expected to lose my family by establishing boundaries. Instead, I had created the possibility for real family connections based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The journey wasn't over. My mother would likely never fully change her fundamental nature. Old patterns would resurface during times of stress. Maintaining boundaries would require ongoing vigilance and courage. But I faced the future with confidence rather than dread, secure in the knowledge that I had found my voice and would never lose it again. As I gathered the last of the wine glasses and carried them to the kitchen, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me stood straight and tall, unburdened by the weight of unreasonable expectations and emotional manipulation. She looked serene, confident, and most surprisingly of all, happy. Not the fragile happiness that comes from keeping the peace at any cost, but the solid contentment that grows from living authentically. I smiled at my reflection, raising an imaginary toast to the woman I had become and the one I was still becoming, to boundaries that protected rather than walls that isolated, to family relationships built on love rather than obligation, to the courage to say enough when necessary and welcome back when earned. Most of all, to the surprising discovery that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and those around us is simply to stand in our truth and let the consequences unfold as they will. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who took you for granted? What gave you the courage to finally speak your truth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice and setting boundaries. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself doesn't mean losing your family. Sometimes it means finding them in a whole new way. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide. Wishing you the courage to speak your truth, whatever that may be.